Hi, seniors. Today is day 8 for Unit 4. We're taking a look at inflation and calculating inflation and the CPI. For your do now, had a review of GDP. You can take a look here. I've also uploaded this key to Schoology. Again, with GDP, people most often make a mistake here with the net exports. Exports minus imports. For unemployment, the labor force is going to be all of your employed plus your unemployed. So that's 100 full-time plus 15 underemployed plus your unemployed for 121.3. Then we can plug that into our formula for the unemployment rate and get 5.2. The natural rate is 4 to 6. We know that our 5.2 is within, so that's healthy, but it does not say anything about discouraged, underemployed, marginally attached workers, and differences in ethnicity and educational levels. Make sure you know how to do problems like this because these are what you're going to see on the test. All right, day 8, how do I calculate CPI and inflation? We're going to calculate the CPI when given a data set, and we're going to calculate inflation when given a data set. Ties in with our standard, again, our last standard. We also have key terms. Key terms quiz on Friday, and our unit assessment I have moved to Wednesday, May 16th. These are the key terms that we will take a look at today: inflation, CPI, and deflation. So keep the big picture in mind. We are looking at economic indicators. We've studied GDP, the unemployment rate, and inflation is the last one. So what is inflation? Basically, it's the rise in the general price level as measured by the CPI. And we'll take a closer look at that in a second. One thing inflation is not is if price of one thing goes up or down. It's not deflation either. We're looking at the collective price of a group basket of goods and services. If the average is going up, then we would say it's inflation. If the average is going down, then it's deflation. So we measure inflation by finding the consumer price index. The consumer price index is basically the price index for a market basket of consumer goods and services. So think about, what do people buy? What do you buy? And it's probably going to be included in that market basket. People buy food and beverages, housing, or it could be rent, or it could be mortgage, clothing, transportation, medical care, when you go to the doctor, recreation, maybe going to the movies, education, communication, other. This is what people spend money on, and so the government tracks the prices of those things and sees if price levels are going up or down for any given year. And that is the primary measure of inflation in the U.S. You can check out these links for more about both of those topics. So that market basket is always changing. Back in the 1970s, you would have had things like cassette recorders. They were brand new. In the 2000s, you would have had things like mobile phones became much more prominent, so those are going to be included in the market basket. And you're going to remove things that are no longer commonly bought, like 35 millimeter film, which is now replaced by digital cameras. So think about in 2018, 2028, 2038, 2048, what are the things that people are going to be buying? Those are things that the government is going to put in this market basket and trace the price level of those things. So how do we calculate CPI? We're going to calculate CPI by adding the items to find the price of the market basket. So in year A, we're going to add together each of these prices, do the same thing in B and C, and we're going to get the price of our market basket. Now, the government is doing this on a much, much larger scale. We're doing this on a much smaller scale so that we can better illustrate it. Notice that the price on average went up from $5.50 to $6.05, but that doesn't mean the price of everything goes up. Look at the price of milk. It went down from $2.50 to $2.40. So overall prices went up, and that is an indicator of inflation. And so then we use this formula to find our CPI, the Consumer Price Index. And so we're going to look at the price in the most recent market basket in the specific year you want to find, divided by the price of the market basket in the base year. CPI is all about the base year. We're always going to be dividing by the same number. That number is the market basket in the base year. So to find the CPI for year B, we're going to take 605 divided by 550 times 100, and we're going to get 110. To find the CPI for year C, we're going to take 633 divided by our base times 100, and we're going to get 115. So now that we have the CPI, we can then calculate inflation. And if we just take a look at this, we see that the price has gone up each year. The basket has gone up from 550 to 605 to 633. Our CPI should also be increasing as well. So here's an example that we did in class. I would encourage you to pause the video and to do this now. Calculate the price of the market basket for each of these years. and then use that formula to calculate the CPI. Again, do this on your own first, and then resume the video and check your answers. All right, here's the price of the market basket in each of those years. And this is the CPI for each of these years using the formula that we just went over. Always round CPI to the nearest whole number. Next, we can calculate inflation. Once we have our basket and CPI, we can then calculate inflation, and we need this formula. This is the formula for the percent change in price from one year to the next. And so we're going to use this to calculate the percent change in inflation. We take year 2 CPI minus year 1 CPI divided by year 1 CPI. And multiply it by 100. So to find the inflation rate for year B, we're going to take the CPI, 110, minus 100, divided by 100, times 100. And we're going to get 10%. Year C, we're going to take 115 minus 110, divided by 110, times 100, and we get 4.5%. Remember, we are not using the base every single time, unlike when we calculate CPI. To calculate inflation, we need this equation, the new year minus the old year divided by the old year times 100. New minus old divided by old times 100. A common mistake is that people will use the base for every single year. Right? Again, that's incorrect. That's only for CPI. We go to the year previous to find the inflation rate. How much did prices change compared to last year? So calculate inflation. Again, this is the same data table that you previously worked with and calculated the basket and the CPI. Now pause the video, calculate the rate of inflation using the formula that we just went over. All right, check your answers and see if you agree here. Again, you're rounding inflation to the nearest decimal. And if our CPI is going up, we should see increases in positive numbers here in inflation rates as well. If you have a number that's negative and doesn't correspond here to a decrease, then you know you made a mistake somewhere. But these numbers could be negative. They could go down, and that would just be an example of deflation. All right, 2 practice problems. CPI goes from 300 to 333 in a given year. The rate of inflation, we plug it into our formula, 333 minus 300 divided by 300 times 100, and we will get 11%. This next one, try it out on your own. All right, so if we plug in these numbers into our formula, we're going to get this, and when we do the calculation, you should get 12.5%. For your homework, you've got Inflation Practice Worksheet 1 and 2. I've uploaded it to Schoology. It's got tables on the front and on the back in which you're going to calculate the price of the market basket, the CPI, and then the inflation rate for 2 different sets of data. Should be good practice. If you can feel uncomfortable with this, you're sitting in a good spot and you'll be ready to go, ready to move on. Key terms quiz on Friday. Let me know of any questions, and I'll see you tomorrow.